Now, gambling and sport, right, I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like in recent years there are two things that have become absolutely intertwined. I cannot think of the last sporting match I watched that didn't see people discussing the odds or featuring countless ads that encouraged me to pull out my phone and have a bet on the game that I was watching. But ahead of the Olympics coverage that we're about to enjoy, did you know that there actually are some regulations when it comes to gambling and Olympic broadcasts? So what are they? And will they be upheld? Well, Martin Thomas is the Interim CEO of the Alliance for Gambling Reform. He joins me now to discuss. Thanks for being here, Martin.
Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it.
So what are the rules when it comes to gambling ads in the Olympics?
It is hard to imagine that there's any restrictions in Australia on gambling ads, isn't it? As you said, we just get so inundated. So, look, for a normal football match, there's a restriction between 8 a.m. and 5:30 p.m, and this is designed to protect children, that you can't advertise for a gambling ad or cite the odds for betting 5 minutes before play and 5 minutes after. So that's obviously in a football game quite easy. But thankfully, for long-form events like the Olympics, they're restricted in that time between 8 a.m. and 8:30 the whole time. So they can play an ad 5 minutes before their coverage starts, and then after 8:30 they can start to advertise again. So it may be one of the few times in probably more than 13 years where we'll see, kind of apart from Olympics before, an event ad-free. And that is on the basis that gambling ads and broadcasters don't breach their own code, which we've seen happen quite often, and that's also a concern to us.
Well, let's talk about that, because as you say, so the last 13 years is probably the big uptick in gambling advertising. We would have had a couple of Olympics since then. So what form do we have in this country as far as our broadcasters and breaching those rules about gambling ads?
Yeah, it's policed by the Australian Communications and Media Authority, so referred to as ACMA. And what they found last Olympics, where Channel 7 was the broadcaster, they breached the rules that I set out 49 times during their last Olympics. And I guess even with football games, Channel 9 was found to have breached the advertising code with their advertising at halftime in the NRL Grand Final as well. So breaches, unfortunately, are quite frequent, and that's why we need people to be watchful, to complain. You can complain through the ACMA website, and really just to put these companies on notice and these broadcasters.
So 49 breaches of these rules Channel 7's last Olympic broadcast had. What happens when you breach these rules 49 times? Like, are there fines, and are the fines worth it compared to the advertising dollar?
Exactly. So there are fines, but what we've found is it's not really changing behaviour. And in fact, we find whether it's on the television or whether it's on ground advertising, the first round of the AFL, Tabcorp admitted that it actually breached its own code by advertising during the game. So, look, we do need to increase penalties, but look, ultimately, there is a proposal before the federal government from one of their own members, Peter Murphy, which was unanimously accepted by all parties, to actually ban all gambling advertising over the next 3 years. Now, the government has been sitting on that for more than a year. We're hopeful there's still time they can do the right thing. I'm just not sure, and everyone I talk to, that we need more gambling advertising. Everyone talks about having less. There was a report recently showing that there was 1 million ads in a 12-month period from May 22 to April 23. 1 million ads just on free-to-air radio and online, something like $236 million. It does feel like it's the Wild West. It just feels like the regulation's not doing anything to protect us at a time when we know gambling harm is just causing so much devastation in the community.
I mean, you've put Channel 9 on notice ahead of these upcoming games. So what does that mean exactly?
Well, we can't do too much. All we can do is watch them. So we'll be watching. So I'll be looking for Australian gold as well as advertising breaches. We'd encourage other people to do it. We have what we believe is a pretty weak code, but at least it's something. And it means in the context of these Olympics, we should not see ads during coverage up until 8:30 p.m. So we're going to be watching them like a hawk. We'll report any breaches. ACMA, to its credit, does take up these complaints when they're made and investigates. It can take a fair bit of time, but it's all we have at the moment. We need something better, but I'll certainly be watching the Olympics with a couple of ulterior motives, not just to see Australia win gold.
Well, what reforms would you, you're the CEO of the Alliance for Gambling Reforms, what reforms do you want to see?
Well, we do want to see a complete ban on advertising, ultimately, gambling advertising. When we think about where we are now compared to, say, the 70s, where we had tobacco advertising all through sport. We had the Foster's Grand Final for AFL and the Rothmans Cup for NRL. What happened previously, particularly with tobacco, the government moved in, banned it because it was a harmful legal product. We don't see any difference with gambling, and I think it works on two levels. One is the public and children particularly deserve to be protected because that's why they advertise through sport, to groom a whole new generation of gamblers. But also the other thing is that other sponsors come in. The AFL and the NRL cry poor. They say they'll never survive if they cut off gambling companies and don't take sponsorship. But it happened before with tobacco, and other sponsors moved in, and the sports have never been stronger.
Martin, I can hear how passionate you are. You're prepared to sit down and watch non-stop Olympics coverage just to see if you can catch Channel 9. I have to ask, why does this mean so much to you?
Look, I think the real thing is the harm that gambling causes in our community. I don't think we really understand it because it's so hidden, because people are quite often shamed. There's a fair stigma against gambling. But look, we think of some of the big issues in society at the moment. We think of domestic violence, and the research shows that if there's someone that gambles in the family, domestic violence is 3 times more likely than just in another relationship. There's some research recently that showed suicides in Australia, if we collected the right data, like they do in other countries, up to 20% of all the suicides that happen in Australia, and we know it's at endemic levels for young men, are linked to gambling. The other element I think that makes me so passionate is the fact that this is an industry that preys on people that can least afford it. They do everything they can to keep people gambling when they can't afford to gamble. At the parliamentary inquiry, one of the heads of the big gambling companies said that they would intervene to stop someone who was actually winning online, but do everything they can to keep someone who was losing. And I've had people who are suicidal and who go right to the companies and try to self-exclude, and rather than getting a response that is, fair and reasonable, they actually get free bets offered to them and incentives. I just think in our day and age, we need to do more to protect people, and particularly a whole new generation. We're finding they're targeting young people as well.
Martin Thomas from the Alliance of Gambling Reform, thank you so much. I really appreciate our talk.
Thanks for your interest. Really appreciate it.
Take care. Hey, listen.